Patrol. What's it all about? Next on ProForce. Hi, and welcome to ProForce. I'm your host, Dave Smith. You know, a big responsibility lies with you when you're on patrol. Now, to better understand that responsibility, this program will talk about such issues as the purposes of patrol. Now, these are the protection of property, the protection of people, the protection of information. Now, the two types of patrols that we'll talk about are foot, which is the most common, and vehicle patrol. Then we'll talk about the techniques of patrol. Now, some of these include conspicuous, inconspicuous, routine, random, and selective. Now, we also want to make certain that you have the right equipment when you go on patrol. Now, that will always include such things as a notebook, your pen and pencil, a flashlight, and this is even in the daylight hours, a recording clock, keys or access cards or codes, protective equipment such as a hard hat, safety goggles, whistles, etc. Such things as a radio or a walkie-talkie or perhaps a pager, your security license if required, a list of important phone numbers, and any special instructions you should have with you at all times. Now next, we'll discuss how you use your four senses for patrol. Now this includes sight, hearing, smell, and touch. And we'll emphasize another sense that you can never ever use when on patrol. Now we'll follow that with the importance of knowing the patrol area. Now this includes such locations as the exit and entry locations, shortcuts you can use if needed, hazards, hiding places, people, location of telephones, location of fire alarms, and the location of an emergency power source. Now, in addition to these, patrol hazards and how to make yourself safety conscious during your tour. Now, let's begin with the purpose of patrol. Now, to be effective in your patrol, you must understand the three purposes of patrol. Now, to appreciate the importance of your assignments, you should know that the three purposes are, number one, the protection of property or security for all things which have monetary value. Number two, the protection of people. Now this includes the avoidance of injuries and criminal acts. Number three, the protection of information. Now this includes the protection of all business information such as trade secrets as well as computer data and other types of information essential to your organization. Now your job and your effectiveness depend on your knowing the purpose of what you do as you patrol. An easy way to remember is to think of the word PIP. That means people, information, and property. Now say it aloud several times to memorize it. People, information, property. Well, now let's move on to the types and techniques of mobile patrol. Now there are two basic types of mobile patrol, and you need to understand them and use them effectively on your patrol assignments. Now for this lesson, we'll concentrate on mobile patrols only. Now basically, mobile patrols are either by foot or by vehicle. Now a foot patrol is obvious, but there are several adaptations for vehicle patrol such as cars, vans, trucks, carts, bicycles, motorcycles, or even boats and airplanes. Now if you'll be using one of these vehicles, make sure you know how to operate them safely and properly. It's also vital to obtain the proper licenses, and remember, do not operate a vehicle unless you can do so safely. Well, now let's talk about some of the basic techniques for both foot and mobile patrol. The first thing to remember is that these are not independent techniques. In fact, they're often combined during a tour of duty. Okay, now let's define the types of patrol and the techniques used during these patrols or during your tour. First off, conspicuous patrol. Now, this is the most common, and it's designed so that people see you and are reminded of your presence. Now, you've seen these officers everywhere. The very fact that you can see them is what we mean by conspicuous patrol. The next type is inconspicuous patrol. Now this means doing your patrol activities in a manner that does not draw undue attention to you. Now it's often effective when you're patrolling in high-risk areas. The saying, out of sight, out of mind, applies to this technique. Next is routine patrol. Now this means providing general and equal patrol coverage to all areas and location. Then there is random patrol. Now random patrol could also be called erratic patrol. Now for example, if you have buildings 1, 2, and 3 in your beat, don't just go to 1, 2, and then 3 when you're on patrol. But go perhaps one night 1, 2, 3, then 2, 1, 3, then 3, 1, 2, or any other combination. And you never do the same twice. This way it's always confusing and difficult for someone to locate a pattern of your patrol behavior. Next is selective patrol. Now this requires concentration of patrol activities in high-risk or known problem areas. An example would be patrolling a parking lot where a significant increase in cars being stolen or thefts from autos has occurred. And finally, stationary patrol, which is used for specific situations such as a stakeout. Well, now let's focus on our equipment. Not having the right equipment for patrol is absolutely unacceptable. Would you try to fix something around your home without the proper tools? Or without any tools at all? Well, of course not. The same is true with your patrol. The right tools make the job safer and easier. So before starting out on patrol, make sure that you check all the equipment you should have and double check it and make sure it's operating properly. Now first off, make sure you have a notebook. Because remember, keeping notes in such things as hazardous areas or other unusual conditions helps make your reports clear and accurate. A pen or pencil, of course, is essential to take the notes. And regardless of what time, day or night, make sure you have a flashlight and make sure its batteries are fresh. Now, if it's rechargeable, make sure that it recharges every time you're off duty. Now remember, you'll be going into many enclosed areas such as warehouses that even though it may be brilliant sunlight outside, you're going to be coming into a very darkened area. And a rule of thumb, whenever you're on a patrol area, if you're going into a darkened area and you've been in the light, then make sure you always light it up. Never walk into a darkened area without first lighting it up. That's essential for your safety. Now, oftentimes what will happen is you'll fail to let your eyes adapt properly. One good thing to do when you first step in from a lighted area, wait for a moment while you're in the darkened area, let your eyes adapt, but make sure you have your flashlight handy. Now, remember that vision also is one of your primary senses, so take care of it and make sure you're using it effectively. A recording clock, if used, should also be taken on patrol. Now, some new clocking systems don't require that you carry a recording clock. Keys or access cards should be taken. Nothing is more frustrating than being unable to get into a building or a room, especially one you've been assigned to patrol. Remember your hard hats or safety goggles if you need those in an area. These items are for your own safety, and be sure to check your orders and instructions regarding these items before you go on patrol. You'll also need a whistle, radio, walkie-talkie, pager, or some other device for summoning assistance. Don't forget your security license or card if required for identification purposes, and a list of important phone numbers such as your supervisor, emergency numbers such as police, fire department, and even local doctors or hospitals. Also remember to take your special instructions with you, which will also be part of your tour, so make sure you have them and understand them. Now there's one more thing I want to mention. That's the importance of properly functioning equipment. Now that's your responsibility to make sure that you have all the right equipment and it's functioning properly and that you perform your duties. Now when in doubt, check with your supervisor. Now let's talk about using all 4 of your senses while on patrol. Now that we have all of our equipment together and it's all in working order, it's time for us to go out and do our patrol. It's essential you use your 4 senses properly. It is generally accepted that observation involves the 5 human senses. But while you're on patrol, you must be aware of how these will help you to be effective. And the first is sight. Now this seems obvious, but remember that look carefully both near and into the distance. Don't assume that it's natural to see everything. Remember, you must pay attention and look where you're going and where you've been. Look up to the front, look to the rear, be sure to look up, down, left, and right. Remember that we are basically a visual animal. Over 90% of all we know through sight. So it's essential also that you have your glasses if you need them, or make sure you have an extra pair of contacts or glasses available when you're on patrol in case yours break or you lose them while on patrol. The next sense is hearing. Do you notice sounds that are different or unusual? You know, is equipment making strange noises, or are there footsteps and voices you should be aware of for your own protection and the protection of others? Now let your ears be what your eyes cannot. Remember that vision is limited to 180 degrees by approximately 65 degrees, while hearing is 360 degrees in all directions. So it's essential that you pay attention on your routine day-to-day patrol to what are the routine sounds and sights that you see. Begin to pay attention to little things. Therefore, you'll know when there's a difference. Now, the same thing is true with smell. Do you notice odors that are different, unusual, or that might cause you a problem? Now, remember the old saying, you often smell smoke before you see smoke or a fire. And remember, where there's smoke, there's very likely fire. So pay attention. What are the usual smells in your area? And pay attention to unusual ones. Finally, touch, the fourth sense that you'll use on patrol. Now, you use this sense to lightly test surfaces. Now, for example, you may encounter what appears to be an overheating motor. Now, the use of touch will help you when the other signs are not so apparent. You can not only maybe you smell something, but you're not quite sure. In other words, it hasn't started to smell, there's no flame yet, but consider this. Touch it first, and touch it with the back. Anytime you're touching for temperature, touch with the back of your hand, so that way your reflex will pull you away from what's hot. Now, the same thing is true with the door. Check a door, touch it, make sure that door is locked, and ensure that you've done your job if the door is supposed to be locked. Don't just look, but also touch. Now, one sense that we've left out, and one sense that we do not want to use on patrol, is taste. You should never use this sense as a security officer. Now, although you may have seen someone on TV test drugs, for instance, a classic thing where the guy tastes it and goes, 98% pure heroin. Had it been 98% pure heroin, that person would have fallen on the ground at that time. Never taste anything. It may be poisonous. It could even be fatal. So remember that strange and unusual things can be found in your patrol areas very often, so never taste anything that is wet or dry. Now we want to talk about knowing your patrol area. We now have our equipment and our senses are keen and alert, but our next item is knowing our patrol area. On your first patrol of an area, it's vitally important that you check to make sure that there are no unusual problems, such as an emergency phone that doesn't work or fire equipment that's inoperable. And in your patrol area, you need to know where the exit and entry locations are, where the shortcuts you can use if needed are, where any hazards may be, where hiding places might be, the people that are in that area, the location of telephones, as well as the location of fire alarms. Also, you need to know the location of an emergency power source. Now, by knowing your patrol area and remaining alert from the first tour to the last, you'll be an effective security officer. Now let's talk about hazards on patrol. Let's talk about those potential hazards, especially since you'll be walking or driving while on patrol. You need to be aware of those things that you might encounter that could create a hazard for you. Some of these could cause you injury, and some could cause injury to others or a loss of property. These hazards include defective sidewalks, defective roads, holes in fences, blocked fire doors or escapes, fire equipment not at proper location or missing, fire extinguishers not charged, stray animals, broken, open, or unlocked doors, broken, open, or unlocked windows, defective alarm systems, vehicles parked in wrong locations or parked illegally, lights out in areas, lights on in areas where people should not be, improperly stored chemicals, unlocked offices, smoking violations, obstructions or slippery areas, loose boards, or unstable platforms and stairs. Remember, this list is designed to make you aware of potential hazards, but the most important point is that you must always remain alert for these and other hazards. And remember to report all hazards promptly. And also remember, when you come across a hazard, don't walk under it or through it, but go around it and get assistance. Now, in summary, we reviewed the three purposes of patrol: people, information, and property, or PIP. The two types of patrol, foot and vehicle. The techniques of patrol, which include conspicuous, inconspicuous, routine, random, and selective. And we reviewed the equipment needed for patrol. And we also showed you the use of the 4 senses for patrol, leaving out, remember, taste, which we never ever should use. And we also emphasized that a security officer must know all aspects of his or her patrol area, including all potential hazards. Remember, knowing your purpose, your patrol area, your equipment, and how to use your senses will help make you a better professional and a better security officer. Well, that's it for ProForce. We'll see you next time.